Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's live streaming. I appreciate you all, guys, whether you're watching me on YouTube or on Rumble. And today I'm doing this solo live streaming because I would like to share with you some of the thoughts that I had in my mind, and I've been thinking about them all day in the past few days, especially after the knife attack that happened in Germany again, and this time by an ISIS lone wolf who comes from Syria, my country. And he attacked a street festival in Solingen and he killed 3 people and injured 8. He was 26-year old. He came from Syria and he was motivated by what is called the Islamic State. And I'm going to tell you in this entire stream why I don't trust the mainstream media, why I don't trust their reporting, and why you shouldn't do it as well. And including this case, the case of the stabbing of people in Germany. And I'm going to show you, in my humble experience, why the press, especially the mainstream corporate press and the journalists who work for them, are also responsible for similar type of attacks against ordinary citizens in Germany and other residents, probably who are not German, who may be also victim of these terrorist attacks, heinous crimes against the people in Germany and the residents as well. And I understand the frustration by some people, and I also understand the reaction. However, we have to really put the dots on the letters, and we have to explain to the people why these type of attacks are happening in Germany and who harbored these people in Germany. And this all goes, there is deep causes for this, root causes for this type of attacks, and also how the mainstream media is manipulating their people and they are shifting their attention to something completely different in order for them not to address this important issue. Now, myself, when I wake up every day in the morning and I would like to prepare for a live streaming, by the way, hello guys to you. You are from Canada, from Sydney, from California, and so many other places tuning into this Syriana Analysis stream. And I would like to explain to you guys why when I wake up in the morning, I'm motivated to create a stream, a conversation with a guest, with an expert, or myself telling you my experiences, because despite my younger age, I come from a region, a troubled region, which witnessed many wars, destruction, coups, regime changes, interventions, sanctions. And from this experience, I accumulated this experience and converted it into some knowledge, or what is called wisdom. And this is why I would like to share with the people, because when I read the comments under the video, I get very excited because I see many people telling me, Kevork, thank you so much for this stream. I learned a lot. And what you have been telling us in the past weeks or months, I'm a new follower. I started to change my opinion about conflicts, for example, in Palestine, in Syria, and you are opening our eyes, this and that. But how I'm motivated when I wake up in the morning, there are two things, actually. Our human um, our human energy, we have, as humans, we have energies, and one of what these energies is the feeling of love. Like, for example, when I wake up, I know that I love my home country Syria, and I love my fatherland Armenia. Therefore, I would like to shed light on these particular issues based on the belonging, the patriotism, and the love for the people and for these countries. Therefore, I would like to shed light on these issues. However, there is also something very, very important, and it is not discussed enough, and that is hatred. Now, you may be surprised and you say, "Oh, Kevork, do you hate?" Well, of course. Like all other human beings, I also have these feelings of hatred, but not hatred towards people, ordinary people. I have so much hatred towards the destruction and the wars that happened in our region and the people who stand behind these wars. And this is also motivation for me to expose their lies. And this is a very dangerous job nowadays to do. And as you see, and we are witnessing with our own eyes what's happening around the world, in the UK, in Germany, in the United States. The police, the FBI, the counterterrorism police, etc. They're breaking into the houses of people or arresting them in the airports and stopping them, confiscating their electronics, because basically they are telling their minds about what's happening around the world, and they are accusing them of committing sometimes treason, sometimes supporting terrorism, in other cases other heinous crimes, such as what happened with the founder and the CEO of Telegram in this case, right? So this is a very dangerous job to do, believe me. However, I also believe that the educational content that I'm presenting to the people outweighs the downsides, and that is living in constant fear of somebody to break into my apartment and arrest me or detain me against such bogus claims, because this is what they do basically. They cannot argue against your argument. They own the police. They own the Jacobian force, and Jacobian force in this case is the security personnel, and the security personnel, they have to follow the orders. They're not here to say, oh, this is unjust and I can't do this or that. No, they have to follow the orders. So I'm not really blaming the ordinary policemen or the security guards, but above them, they have their superiors, and these superiors receive instructions from even people above them. And these arrests and the operations unfortunately happen against people like Julian Assange. Now, against also today, there was a new case of a woman who was arrested by the UK police, and her name is Sarah Wilkinson. And before that, Richard Medhurst. Vanessa Beeley was stopped at the airport by the Counterterrorism Act when she landed in London. Also, Keith Clarenberg, so many other people. So nowadays, if you are exposing the criminality of these people in power, you will be in big trouble. Rest assured of that. So this job is quite dangerous. Now, before I started this YouTube channel and trying to shed light on the realities or show them the other side of the story and exposing the criminality of these psychopathic people, etc., I had experiences in my life which led me to become this person, right? I mean, when I was a child, when I was a kid, and I'm born in 1978, right? And then when I was like 13 years old, and when I used to watch the footage coming from Palestine, the second Intifada, for example. The kids are throwing stones against tanks. There is grave injustice against the Palestinians, and these children have been fighting with stones against tanks. Those footage were very impressive, and it leaves something positive in your conscience, and also anger, because you want to help these people, right? So this motivates you later when you grow up, because these images, despite that you may not remember every single footage, but you have processed them and you accumulated a conscious. You build a conscious deep inside you you don't need to remember every single detail or footage, but you have the conscience and you have the experience and you have now the knowledge that you can also tell other people about the injustices in this region, right? So this was, in my opinion, the first trigger, the second Intifada. I mean, I'm growing up in Syria, and you see this footage of children throwing stones on the tanks. Then the 2001 9/11 attacks. Now, back then, I didn't know much about Al Qaeda. I didn't know that Al Qaeda and they were supported by the United States in Afghanistan against the Soviet Union. I didn't know about the probability of this being a facilitated attack on the United States. Some people have turned a blind eye in the US itself in order for this attack to happen. So this justifies the wars on Afghanistan for geopolitical reasons and also against Iraq. Now, I'm not an expert on 9/11. I haven't done my own investigation much, but I hard it fine to believe that somebody on a Dialose in Afghanistan, in Tora Bora, has planned all these big, huge, multiple folds terrorist attack against American citizens, which started all this war against quote-unquote terrorism. And this was the trigger or the start of the U.S. imperial wars in the Middle East, Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Syria, in Libya, in Sudan, in Congo, in different places around the world, in also Somalia, Eritrea. So then now in 2024, I have more experience about this, and I don't really believe in the official narrative any longer, right? In 2003, the invasion of Iraq, it was based on bogus justifications. There were no weapons of mass destruction, and the Americans know about it, and the Brits know about it. And despite that, they invaded Iraq and they destroyed the country and they killed hundreds of thousands of people. They tortured people in concentration camps. They have created a huge wave of refugees, and this is important. They have created huge waves of refugees in Europe, the Americans and the Brits. And this war has been pushed and promoted and persuaded by Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu himself has testified in, I think, in Congress or in front of some of the commissions there that America has to go to war. He made a case for war against Iraq. And if you want to learn about the details of this, you can buy the book Israel Lobby and US Foreign Policy by John Mearsheimer and read how the Israel lobby has built a case for war in Iraq. So they created this refugee crisis and they also emptied Iraq from its Christians. And they have destroyed one of the cradle of civilizations in Mesopotamia, in the Levant, right? So this was also one of the cases that left so much pain in my chest. And I remember when Baghdad has fallen and I cried. I was 15 years old. We didn't like Saddam Hussein in Syria. Syria and Iraq, they were not on good terms, but we knew that this is not about Iraq. We knew that this is about occupying, this is not about Saddam, but this is about occupying Iraq. Later, in 2005, there was this mysterious assassination of the former Prime Minister of Lebanon, Rafiq al-Hariri, and the official narrative was Syria assassinated him, right? And now in 2024, they don't even have an evidence for that, and they're no longer even accusing Syria of that. But back then, this was politically motivated accusation against Syria in order to kick the Syrian forces out of Lebanon, which were located there and employed there by an Arab League resolution to end the civil war in Lebanon. But Syria saw that it stayed there, it will create a buffer zone between Syria and Israel, and they started having their conflict with Israel on Lebanese territory. So the Israelis wanted to kick them out of Lebanon in order to bring the fight inside Syria. So in 2005, the assassination happened. Syrian troops withdraw from Lebanon. And in 2006, the Israelis invade Lebanon because there is no longer Syrian army there. And they thought that they can crush Hezbollah in 2006. And they have miserably failed in that. But I remember this conflict very, very well with all its details, 33-day war in July. And this also left big let's say, impact in my conscience. And in 2007, the Gaza War and the Gaza massacres again, all the way we moved to 2011. And to 2011, there was the Arab Spring and the invasion of Libya, the coming of the Muslim Brotherhood to power in Tunisia, in Egypt, and they tried it also in Syria, right? Now, in 2014, this was like 2-3 years after the eruption of the so-called Arab Spring, I have accumulated, let's say, enough writing skills to write a first opinion article in a very back then famous newspaper called Lebanese As-Safir. As-Safir was a very famous and elite, let's say, newspaper, and they had a paper version. Later, they declared bankruptcy and they closed their newspaper, unfortunately, because in the era of digital, let's say, news outlets, they couldn't survive in this environment. But back then, I wrote my first article, and this was about who controls the American media, right? And when you check who controls the American media, you realize that back then there were 7 corporations controlling 90% of what you see and what you consume on your TV channels and on your streamers and on your internet, etc. And now there are 6 corporations. It become even worse, right? So when you read and you realize that these corporations are all big billionaires and they have an invested interest in what we have to watch and what opinions we have to consume and what messages they are going to send to us in order for us to have a certain attitude and certain opinions about different important topics that impact us, you realize that they are conspiring against the people. And conspiracy is not like something they always try to undermine this term conspiracy. I mean, if there are 2 people and these two people can evade taxation nowadays, in, let's say, in Germany or in the United States, they found a way to evade taxation. They would conspire against the system to evade taxation, right? This happens among all ordinary, even people. I mean, two parents could conspire against their child so that the child doesn't eat that extra chocolate. And you're going to convince me people with billions of dollars of budgets and invested interest in pursuing certain foreign policy approaches. You're going to convince me that these people are not going to manipulate and conspire against the people. This is the basic thing that they have to do. If they don't do it, they cannot be in this position anyways. So this was a really opening for me, like an eye opening for me to learn who controls the American media. Now, in 2014, this was the first time that I published this, let's say, written article in a Safir newspaper. And in 2015, I came to Germany. Now, in Germany, when I arrived in October, this was at the peak of the refugee crisis, and it was the hot topic all the way. And all the press in Germany, they were only hyper focused on the refugee crisis and the importance of receiving the refugees. And my opinion on the refugee crisis has developed. Like, if when I said something in 2015 or 2016, it doesn't reflect my opinions now in 2024. Back then, maybe I was in a different position, and maybe I was in a more difficult situation back then in all terms, like socially, financially, and everything was so much pressured. I had probably back then a different opinion of what's happening. And now I have, in my opinion, a balanced opinion about the refugee crisis. But back then, when I saw the influx of the refugees from Syria, hundreds of thousands of them are coming to Germany. And I just realized that due to my work in also some of the refugee camps as a translator, sometimes I'm visiting a friend, etc., that there are people who shouldn't be refugees, like in Germany, those who carried arms in Syria, right? So those who carried arms in Syria, whether pro-government or anti-government, they're part of the problem. They have created refugee crisis, right? So why would they receive a refugee status here and be protected? But my particular concern was the people who were carrying arms against the government. In my opinion, vast majority of them are Islamists, and I still hold that opinion. So if someone comes from Syria and he was a fighter and militant and fighting against the government, the probability of him to be a democratic or secular is probably less than 1%. So most of them, the vast majority of them, are Islamists, and I don't think these people will integrate into the German society, let alone assimilate in the German society. They are a danger. I mean, danger to the Syrians in Syria, dangerous to the Syrians in Germany, dangerous to everyone, including the residents of Germany. They believe in political violence to pursue their goals. So what else shall I expect from them except probably holding a gun with them or a knife and committing heinous crimes, right? So we reached to the point where when I saw this type of people, and one day I heard the ISIS song being played in one of the refugee camps in Germany, and the police came and there was a big issue, and I was frustrated. Out of frustration, I spoke back then and I said that it's impossible, like integration is not possible with this type of people, right? And this was aired on German TV. I was demonized. I was called a fascist, a right wing, far right, and all this stuff. And it was crazy. I wasn't even close to a right wing. I was just warning the people against these type of radical elements among the Syrian refugee ranks. I mean, the ordinary people who came from Syria, and someone is a craftsman, other is a trade, he was a businessman, other one was a doctor, other is an engineer, and the other one was just a worker in a supermarket, etc. Any type, if they are coming here and they want to learn the language and work and integrate, I mean, of course, it's a plus for Germany, right? But there is also these radical elements that we have to speak about them. I don't understand why are we really shy to speak about these radical elements, because they have danger against us as well. I mean, they first of all they endanger our reputation. They tarnish our reputation. They also endanger many Syrians here who are now probably also threatened with deportation because of these crimes. And this has happened many, many times in Germany. Since 2015 till today, there are, of course, lone wolves. These people are lone wolves, but they're acting violently against the Germans and against the other communities in the country, and committing these heinous crimes. And we reached to a point now that we have in a knife attack. This happened on August 23rd, 2024. A deadly knife attack occurred at a street festival in Solingen, Germany, leaving 3 people dead and 8 injured. The suspect, he is a 26-year-old Syrian man, has been identified and is believed to have been motivated by IS ideology. The suspect surrendered to authorities on August 24th and confessed to the crime. German prosecutors have initiated a terrorist investigation, and the suspect is suspected of being a member of the IS. The suspect arrived in Germany in 2022 and applied for asylum. He was reportedly living in a refugee center in Solingen, just 300 meters from the scene of the attack. The attack has sparked a heated debate about immigration and security in Germany. Some, like Vivian Vetter, a local resident, have expressed anger at the perceived lack of control over refugee influx and the failure to integrate newcomers. Others, like Kadir Ayten, a Turkish man and Solingen local, are concerned that the attack will widen social divisions and increase xenophobia. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has pledged to tighten weapons laws, particularly regarding knives, and to increase deportations and rejected asylum seekers. The government has also announced cross-party talks to address the issue of irregular migration. Now, do I believe that they will address this issue? I highly doubt that. I highly suspect, because they're not really dealing with the root cause of this issue. The root cause of this issue is that this ISIS phenomena is not a local product in Syria. It's not a local product in Iraq. It is exported phenomena. First of all, IS, Qaeda, and all these groups, their birthplace, it's not in Syria and Iraq. This is a Wahhabi ideology, and the Wahhabi ideology is or was coming from Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia used to export Wahhabism to the rest of the world, and Saudi Arabia, in their official letters, which was leaked by WikiLeaks, they explicitly say that they were tasked by the United States to spread Wahhabism in different parts of the world and create radical spots. In order to destabilize these countries, people need to understand that the US has played an essential role in spreading Wahhabism and hence Al Qaeda and ISIS around the world. This Wahhabist ideology has been spread for decades, at least since the 60s, 70s of the last century, through what is called madrasas. Madrasa in Arabic means school. And madrasas is like, it's a religious school that Saudi Arabia used to build in places like Pakistan, in India, in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, in different countries in the Middle East, in North Africa, in other parts of Africa, in order to indoctrinate the people with Wahhabism. And also in Xinjiang, by the way, in Xinjiang, where the majority are Muslim populated, this was Saudi Arabia's job to radicalize some of the elements of these people in the Uyghur community and make them a victim of employment by ISIS and Al Qaeda. And this led into many terrorist attacks in Xinjiang. And Xinjiang is very important for China, where the Silk Road will pass through, right? So they're destabilizing that area so that China cannot access to the rest of the world through this Silk Road. And in Syria is similar. They use these radical jihadists against Assad. They weaponized them against Assad because they saw Assad a threat to their global dominance, including the security of Israel. So they supported them against Assad. They did the same thing in Iraq in 2003, because in 2003, when they invaded Iraq and they saw there is a popular resistance against them, they started pumping up these radical elements in the Iraqi society and giving them weapons, money, and training, also facilitated by Saudi Arabia, for these terrorist groups to attack and create sectarian strife and sectarian and civil war in Iraq. So this has happened after 2003 in Iraq, only when the United States invaded, and they created these waves of refugees, hundreds of thousands from Iraq and Syria, based on these wars that they fueled and they created with their weapons and money and training these terrorist groups. So these terrorist groups now, they are an extension to the U.S. foreign policy, and this is something I remember the economist Professor Michael Hudson has explained in one of his interviews a few years ago how Al Qaeda is a contract army for the United States. It's not like the United States has an boots on the ground from the ISIS, but they're the ones who facilitate and create the proper environment for these groups to thrive and gain momentum and also fight against the enemies of the United States, from Xinjiang to Pakistan to Afghanistan to Syria to Iraq to Egypt to Sudan to everywhere, even in Yemen. Look in Yemen. In Yemen, Al Qaeda and ISIS, they fight on the side of the forces who are anti-Husis or anti-Ansarullah. Always, everywhere you go, you will find that these fighters, these militants, these terrorists are fighting on the side of or against the enemies of the United States. Those are not coincidences, right? So this week, we have this attack that happened in Germany by this ISIS. So if we don't tell to the people this context, we are lying to them. And we're not telling them the entire truth, right? So we have this attack happening in Germany, and this is coming from the German press, right? Tagesschau. So the Tagesschau, so look at this ridiculous article now by Tagesschau. This is a famous newspaper and in or website in Germany. Why Assad is silent about Solingen? So there is an attack happening by ISIS in Germany, and the author, instead of addressing the core issue, which is terrorism and where terrorism comes from, he's blaming Assad, basically. So look what he says. The state media in Syria hardly reported on the terrorist attack in Solingen, not even the fact that the alleged perpetrator came from Syria. Syrian security expert Navar Saban, I don't know who is this, he's an expert, basically, according to him, has a simple explanation for this. For dictator Bashar al-Assad, the whole case has nothing to do with Syria. He doesn't care whether a Syrian has carried out an attack in Germany, says Shaban or Saban. He says since 2013-2014, he has treated all people from areas that are not under his control as if they were not Syrians. Saban worked for a think tank in Turkey. I would like to know the name of this think tank, and I can assure you with 99% of certainty that it belongs to the Muslim Brotherhood, which they support these Al-Qaeda elements. So he lives in exile, he says, like almost everyone who is critical of the regime in Damascus. Only exile media meaning the media that is funded by Qatar, those are the ones who covered the crime in Solingen in detail. Reporters for the Istanbul-based Syria TV, of course, Syria TV is a Qatari-funded broadcaster based in Turkey, reported live from Germany. They stressed how great the anger was in Germany after the knife attack in politics, among the population, and also in the media. The broadcaster also addressed the concerns of Syrians in Germany, their fear of the possible reactions to the crime in Solingen. They fear two things. On the one hand, being excluded in Germany and being at the center of a debate about how dangerous migrants are. On the other hand, it is the discussion about possible deportations to Syria that worries them. So journalist Abdullah al-Ghadawi is, again, of course, he's an anti-Assad. He cites several cases of returnees to Syria whose whereabouts no one knows, but we don't know who are these people. He doesn't even mention their names, but they continuously saying that people are returning to Syria and they disappear because they are refugees, right? He fears that they have ended up in the Assad regime's torture prisons. He doesn't know. He fears. All refugees from Syria are viewed as terrorists. All refugees from Syria are viewed as terrorists by the ruler Assad, says Ghadawi. This is an essential part of the Syrian region. Like, there is no counter argument against this. All refugees, he says, are considered as terrorists. Who is this expert saying this? So then he says if Germany or other European countries actually decide to negotiate with the regime in Damascus about the deportation of Syrian criminals, the talks are likely to be complicated. Assad himself has made it clear several times that he has little interest in the return of refugees. This is big, blatant lie. Assad made an entire committee for the return of the refugees, but they are conflating here refugees with criminals. And to be honest with you, I don't think that the Syrian government would like to accept criminals. And of course, they would like to receive refugees because they need manpower and they need the expertise that they fled from the country to European countries. Back in 2017, he said of the consequences of the war and the mass exodus from Syria, we have lost the best of our youth, that's true, but we have gained a healthier, more homogeneous society. This is not what he said, by the way. I'm going back to this now. So this article has been spread, of course, on X, and Germans are fighting on this article between pro and against. And one of the commentators which caught my attention is from the Sarah Wagenknecht coalition, and this is a left-wing new coalition in the parliament, and they are anti-imperialist. I think one of the least or one of the only few true left-wing anti-imperialist powers groups in the parliament, and this is the Sarah Wagenknecht coalition. So this is what I replied to this article, right? So my opinion about this article is the following. Sometimes you have to wonder if these journalists even know anything about Syria before writing an article about the country. First of all, Syrian state media doesn't report on terrorist attacks in Germany because for 13 years, the Syrian government has been warning Western governments not to supply weapons, money, and logistics to these same terrorists wreaking havoc in the country. And now that one of the same terrorists who benefited from foreign funding has come to Germany and carried out a heinous terrorist attack, they're demanding that Damascus condemn it. Secondly, the German government is aware that many Syrian refugees come to their country on a regular basis, and nobody cares if you're a refugee in Syria or not. And they wouldn't even know because you only need to show your Syrian ID to enter the country. Nobody will ask you for your German resident permit. So if you go to Syria and you're on the borders, you want to get into your own country, you don't show your German ID, German resident permit, you show your Syrian ID. How would they know that you're a refugee in Germany? They don't care. Third, Syrian government forces are attacked daily by ISIS cells in the desert, since their main training site is near the Al-Tanf border crossing occupied by the US Army, and these terrorists have found a safe haven there. The question is, if Assad's army is not the enemy of ISIS, because this is what the author claimed later, then why does ISIS attack and kill Syrian soldiers but never American soldiers who are closer to them than the Syrian army posts? The only correct information in this article is Damascus's refusal to take back the criminals and terrorists from Germany. One day, the author of the article should go to Damascus or another Syrian city and ask the people there if they want to take back ISIS terrorists they have been killing, or these ISIS terrorists were killing them for over a decade. This type of reporting is really disgusting, Like, these journalists, they don't know anything about the war in Syria. They don't know about the demographics in Syria. They don't know about the exodus of the refugees. And they don't know why many people who come to Germany are anti-Assad. Because basically, many people who fled the country, who were living in anti-government held areas, they were anti-Assad. And they went to Turkey and they came later to Germany. These are 1 million Syrian refugees. Probably, I don't know, maybe 70%, maybe 60%, maybe 80%. I don't know. They are anti-Assad. But the vast majority of the Syrians are still in Syria. And they don't have to be pro-government, but I mean, there is a considerable number of them are pro-government. They're trying to portray that all the refugees coming to here are anti-Assad because everything that happened in Syria is Assad's fault, and he has to take the responsibility of the entire thing. Is also crazy because there were over 120,000 multinational terrorists fighting in Syria against the Syrian government. Are you going to tell me those radical elements didn't play any role in creating this refugee crisis? Are you telling me that ISIS has created roses in the desert in Syria? Are you going to tell me that al-Nusra was not decapitating women because they were outside in the street without a headscarf? I mean, when you come to Germany, you are also encouraged to become anti-Assad because you will probably receive your refugee status faster, and your story would be more convincing. And also, there is an intimidation against the people who are not part of this so-called revolution. I mean, myself, when I spoke, you came after me, you tried to prosecute me, you tried to deport me from Germany just for saying these facts. So many people are deterred and afraid to speak up their mind because you made an example out of me that if you speak up, then we will treat you like we treated Kevork, right? So you terrorize the people, and persuade and intimidated them, and because you don't want them to speak up, and then they come and say, oh, everyone in Germany, they have fled from Assad. It's easy to create such narratives. Our friend Manaf Hassan, who is German, and he's, I believe, I don't know, but I believe he's part of the Zara Wagenknecht coalition, and he's originally from Syria. I just want to drink water, excuse me. So this is the comment of Manaf. It's in German, and we can translate it. So he says about this same issue, right? He says, now it gets really grotesque. This article expects an answer from Assad in Syria regarding the situation in Germany. 1. In recent years, since 2011, Syria has waged war against Islamists, terrorists who were supported by the West, including our federal governments. This is now known and proven. 2. Assad has spoken out several times in recent years about Europe's dangerous interference in the Middle East, supporting Islamists, terrorists, and the dangerous migration policy it is pursuing. Assad said, we learned a lesson in the 1980s with the Muslim Brotherhood militant uprising that you cannot play terrorists you cannot really use terrorists as a political card. You cannot put this card back in your pocket afterwards. This card is like a scorpion. At some point, it will sting you too. He said this in 2013. Also, Assad said, if Europeans supply weapons, Europe's backyard will become terroristic, and Europe will pay the price. One consequence of supplying weapons to the extremist groups would be an increasing threat of terrorism on the European continent. Terrorists will return battle-hardened and equipped with extremist ideology, also in 2013. Assad has also repeatedly stressed that he would like the refugees back in Syria for reconstruction and for the country in general because the best of the young people have been lost. He has also issued amnesties for criminals, Islamists, and terrorists. This is not mentioned at all in the article. At the same time, he said that we have a healthier, more homogeneous society, and that's true. But he didn't mean it in relation to all refugees, but rather to terrorists, Islamists, and criminals. And a sentence that I've heard so damn often in and from Syria in recent years. Quote, it's lucky that we got rid of people like that. We feel safer and more comfortable. Yeah, if you speak to Syrians in Syria, they will say, we're lucky because these people left. These radicals, they mean, right? They left Syria. Syria wants the Syrians to come back, but Syria certainly doesn't want only terrorists, Islamists, and criminals. What kind of journalism is it when you deliberately interview Syrian exiles who are against Assad just because it is now about deportations to Syria and negotiations with Assad and just to create a mood against it? Everyone knows by now that Syria has so many facets. Why are no direct voices from Syria included? In Syria, regardless of whether you like it or not, the majority are behind Assad. After 13 years of war in Syria, people should really understand or should have understood that by now nobody wants second Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, and etc. I think there is no other thing that I could add really to Manaf's points if I already explained my opinion. But this type of reporting, and now after what's happening in October 7, I mean, look, during the Corona era, I used to speak to ordinary Germans about my suspicions about the official narrative about COVID and why we should accept all these tyrannical measures, restrictions, lockdowns, closures, schools, kindergartens, and everything, closing the gyms, whereas McDonald's and Burger Kings and all this junk shit food was being open, and not let people go and lay down on grass under the sun to take some vitamin D, which is essential for them to fight against COVID. When all these things were banned, I was speaking against that. But many people actually in Germany, they were like, Kevork, why would the media lie? This is something that I was really surprised because apparently many Germans trust in their press. But this has changed during Corona and now with the Palestine case after October 7. And this is something that is emphasized by the German press itself, surprisingly, by Tagesschau itself, because they reported about it. And the article says, little trust in German media. So a ZAPP survey, it is a center for polling, I believe, shows that almost every second person has little or no trust in German reporting on the war in the Middle East. Where does this mistrust come from? There has been war in Gaza and Israel for almost 11 months. The media have been reporting on it for almost 11 months, and for almost 11 months, the media have been repeatedly criticized for their reports. One criticism is particularly loud. German media are reporting one-sidedly in favor of Israel. So are the German media losing important trust? The NDR media magazine, ZAAP, commissioned a representative survey from Infratest DMAP. The result: 40% of all respondents have a lot or a great deal of trust in German reporting on the war in Gaza and Israel. But 48%, or almost 1 in 2, have little or no trust. So, the 33%, they have little trust in the reporting of the German press regarding what's happening in Gaza, and 15%, they don't have trust at all. So this is 48%. 12%, they don't know. Only 7%, they believe it completely, right? 33%, they are relatively believing in the press. So this is huge numbers, right? So I'm happy that this is happening, and I'm happy that this type of awakening is happening also among the German people, because for a long time, in my opinion, they should have lost this trust, right? And for many reasons. First of all, it's quite obvious that there is a perceived bias in mainstream media. Many believe that journalists are no longer neutral and are instead promoting a particular political agenda, leading to feelings of mistrust and alienation, especially among those who identify with opposing opinions. Two, they're creating polarization. The increasing divide between political parties and the amplification of extreme views have created an environment where people are more likely to seek out sources that confirm their beliefs rather than seeking balanced reporting from mainstream media. The third is lack of accountability. Some experts argue that journalists' commitment to seeking truth and holding governments accountable has waned, contributing to a sense of detachment from the public's best interest. And finally, fourth, perceived misleading. A significant portion of the population, half of Americans, according to a Gallup survey, believe that news organizations deliberately mislead them, further eroding trust. I will just go one step further and say, like Julian Assange said, some journalists are criminals. They were criminals because they cover up for the wars of the establishment, of the elites, of the criminal psychopaths in different parts of the world. They have covered up for the wars in starting from Vietnam, Korea, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Palestine. Their job was to cover up for these wars and for the war crimes of their masters. They are complicit in this. I would go one step further and also call them war criminals, and they should be behind bars for justifying these wars and not telling the people the truth. Not telling the people the truth. And instead, they put people like Julian Assange in jail. They are detaining Richard Medhurst. They have also invaded the house of Scott Ritter. They have stopped and interrogated Vanessa Beeley, Kit Klarenberg, and this week they have also invaded the house of Sarah Wilkinson, who is a famous pro-Palestinian activist. So the police came to her house at 7 a.m. in the morning, 12 armed men from the counterterrorism police, and they arrested her for, quote, content that she has posted online. And they have confiscated her electronics, and they have accused her of supporting terrorism for what's happening in the Gaza Strip. So this is something that is happening now. It's like been normalized. We have the CEO of Telegram has been accused of heinous crimes because he doesn't do content moderation, quote unquote. So look, this type of work, guys, is really dangerous, and we could all end up like people like myself be detained or been thrown to jail for speaking up or speaking against these criminals, right? So it's also up to you to speak up. I'm not going to tell you take the risk and speak up. I'm only encouraging you to speak up because you don't know how important and how strong and is to speak up. You don't know the strength of speaking up, because if there was no strength and if it wasn't making any change, Why would they bother to arrest these people, right? Because they know it makes a change and they're terrified. And they know that the truth can fly everywhere and truth has power. And once you tell the truth to someone, this someone will feel it. They will understand that it's true. Whereas when they tell the lies, they need to spend millions and millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars for these script readers on your television to tell you what to think and how to act and what is your best interest. They are lying to you. So I encourage you to speak up, but it's risky. However, when people understand the power of no and pushing against this type of lies, and when the majority say no, it will stop. It can't continue. It only continues because the vast majority of the people are silent, and some people call them cowards. Therefore, I would say that there has to be collective work, collective action against this type of criminality, and only that can stop this the misery of the people. It's a lot, you know. I have so much love for the people around the world, including my people, but I also have lots of hatred for this criminality and these wars. That's why I do what I do. So, if you like what I'm doing, guys, it would be very appreciative if you just hit the like button, subscribe to this YouTube channel, or create a Rumble account and also follow me on Rumble, because you never know what day and what time I could be also deplatformed from this YouTube platform, Google, for telling an inconvenient truth to you. So I also encourage you to join on Rumble. And if you like to support my independent work, the one like I'm doing here, you can become a patron. The link is scrolling on the screen, patreon.com/Syriana Analysis. It's very important for me to have a steady income, also to be able to continue paying everything, you know, like I'm doing this job for educational purposes, but at the same time, life is very expensive, unfortunately. So this was all for today, guys. I just wanted to tell you that tomorrow is Friday and I'm unable to make a live streaming. The next live streaming is going to be on Monday, 5 p.m. Central European Time, 11 a.m. Eastern American Time. So I apologize that I will not be able to make a live streaming tomorrow, but I will definitely do it on Monday again. So I will see you on Monday. Peace be upon you, upon your families. Salam.